Golden Ribbon. Today we're going to look at a quick tip how I set up my scene for motion graphics in Blender. So how I set up the scene. So let's take a look at our screen here. We just have the default cube. This is what you're going to get default for Blender. This is Blender 2.91. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and delete the default cube. Let me just change this to 4. Okay, when we delete the default cube, I'm just going to go ahead and go and press 7 on the numpad. That's 7 on the numpad, and that gives me the Y on the vertical axis and the X on the horizontal axis. And you see that's connotated by the red line and the green line here. We're going to go ahead and press Control Alt and 0, and what that does is snaps the camera to the current view. So we have the camera snapped to the view now, and I typically use 1920 by 180. That's full HD. And then we're going to go ahead and create a rectangle. So I'm going to hit Shift and A, and we're going to go to the mesh. I'm going to create a plane, and then I'm just going to press S. You can also go to add up here in the top left, and press S, and with the plane selected, and scale up by pulling the mouse down. That's towards your elbow. I'm going to press SX and scale across by pulling the mouse across. That's down to your elbow. So both for when you're scaling up in value, you're going to be moving the mouse downwards, and when you're scaling down, that means you are reducing the size of the object. You're going to move your mouse up. Cool. So with that, have our plane in front of us. Then we're going to go up to the top, and we're going to look for shading. When we're in shading, let me just go ahead and disable the world right here. We're in shading, we're going to see this rectangle right here, and we're just going to press 0 on our numpad to see what we're seeing here in the camera. So pressing 0 takes you in and out of camera mode. Good. Next we're going to press new, and that's going to give us 2 shaders, a material output and a principal BSD as default. We're not going to use principal BSD right here, so just going to go ahead and delete that. Then we're going to go ahead and hit Shift and A again, and we're going to look for by pressing search, look for gradient texture. Cool. And we're going to look for one more thing. We're going to look at texture coordinate. Cool. So the texture coordinate is how Blender is going to determine the coordinates for this texture, for a texture node on the object of your choice, and it gives you some options here. You can generate it using Blender's internal generation mode. It can determine the coordinates by normals. You can UV unwrap the coordinates. You can use the object coordinates as a determinant for where that texture is going to be. You can use a camera to determine where the texture coordinates are going to be. You can use the window, which is the window out here, greater window, and you can use a reflection. So for me, when I'm doing my radial gradient in the beginning, sometimes it's linear. I use object, because object uses the pivot point or the center point, which is right into the center of the plane that I have here, which is what I want for the radial gradient. I want it to emanate from the center and move outwards. So once you use object, you'll see this black, green, yellow, and red. Then we're going to go ahead and bring our gradient texture in the middle of that, and it's going to turn to a black and white, and that's because we have linear. So we have a linear gradient is moving from left to right for linear. We want this to be a spherical gradient, so we go ahead and press spherical, and because the object has its coordinate in the center, it automatically puts the radial gradient in the center also, which is exactly what we want. Now the only thing next now is to really change the color of this, and we can do that by going Shift and A, search, and we're going to look for color ramp. Cool. And color ramp, and all that does is that it assigns the first color, the black, to the black area here, and the white to the center area here. So we just have to select each one of the stop gradient stops to determine the color. Let's just put some any old color here so that we can see what's happening. Good. And then we're going to select this color here and use a different color. I'm going to select the white peg and use a different color here, slightly pink. Okay. And then because I find linear to be a bit harsh for the color ramp, I typically use ease, and that makes for a smoother gradient overall. So that's how I set up my scene in Blender to do my motion graphic animations or to present to you. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, give it a thumbs up. This is a simple quick tip showing you how to do radial gradients and really any gradient on a plane, flat gradient on a plane in Blender, and also how I particularly set up my scene when I'm presenting to you. Cool. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask. I'll do my best to answer to my best of my ability. But until I see you again with another tutorial, get up and design a new door. Later.